as geopolitical tensions simmered across Europe and the Middle East. A new front opened in the global economic arena, with Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva issuing a defiant challenge to the United States from a position of collective strength. Speaking from Brasilia at the opening of the annual BRICS summit, President Lula delivered a powerful and direct response to recent tariff threats emanating from the Trump administration. The White House, consistent with its America First economic policy, had signaled its intent to review and potentially impose steep tariffs on key Brazilian exports, including steel, ethanol, and agricultural products, citing unfair competition and the need to protect American industries. The threats, articulated by United States Trade Representative Jamieson Greer, were meant to pressure Brazil into new trade concessions. However, the move appears to have backfired, provoking not submission but a bold declaration of economic reciprocity that threatens to ignite a trade war between the United States and the powerful emerging economic bloc. Standing before the leaders and representatives of Russia, India, China, South Africa, and the bloc's newly expanded membership, President Lula framed the American threats as an act of protectionist unilateralism that undermines the principles of free and fair global trade. He argued that such tactics were a relic of a past era and were unacceptable in the modern multipolar world that BRICS seeks to build. In the pivotal moment of his speech, Lula directly addressed the threats from Washington with a simple but potent warning. We seek partnership, not patronage. We seek dialogue, not dictates. But let it be known to all, if they believe they can impose their will upon us through economic coercion, they are mistaken. We have learned from history we will not be passive. If he can impose tariff on our products, then we can and we will do the same. The line, if he can impose, then was met with sustained applause from the assembled delegation, signaling a unified front against what they perceived as American economic bullying. Lula did not stop at rhetoric. He elaborated on Brazil's potential response, making it clear that retaliation would be strategic and substantial. He mentioned that Brazil is a major market for American goods, including high-tech products, pharmaceuticals, and agricultural commodities like wheat. A retaliatory tariff from Brazil alone would be painful for specific sectors of the U.S. economy, but the true weight of his threats came from the context of the BRICS summit. He explicitly called on his partner to develop a joint BRICS mechanism for trade defense, a framework that would allow the member nations to act in concert to counter punitive economic measures from any country. Such a coordinated response from a bloc that represents over 40% of the world's population and a significant share of global GDP would be a formidable weapon. It could target a wide array of American exports, severely impacting U.S. of de-dollarization, linking it directly to the need to insulate member economies from American sanctions and tariff pressure. He announced that Brazil, as the host nation, would be fast-tracking discussions to increase the volume of trade settled in local currency among BRICS members, bypassing the U.S. dollar entirely. Our economic sovereignty depends on our ability to trade freely in currency of our own choosing, Lula asserted. The over-reliance on a single currency for international trade gives its issuer an exorbitant privilege and a weapon that can be used against any of us. The time to build our own path is now. This strategic linkage of retaliatory tariff with the long-term goal of de-dollarization was seen by analysts as a particularly sharp escalation. It transformed a specific trade dispute into a fundamental challenge to the architecture of the US-led global financial system. The message from Brasilia was clear. The era of passive acceptance of America's economic dictates is over, and the world's rising powers are prepared to use their collective economic might to forge a new set of rules. In a stunning and seemingly contradictory policy announcement, the Trump administration has clarified it will send a new package of weapons to Ukraine, just days after rebuffing Kyiv's appeal for major offensive system. The move, which initially caused confusion in foreign capitals, is now being understood as a highly conditional and strategically narrow form of support, designed not to fuel a Ukrainian victory, but to prevent an imminent collapse of the front line. The White House stressed that this new aid is fundamentally different in character and purpose from what Kyiv has requested. It has been explicitly framed as providing the means for active defense, only aimed at stabilizing the battlefield to create conditions for a negotiated settlement rather than enabling a large-scale counteroffensive. This nuanced position reveals a complex American strategy, managing the decline of the Ukrainian military position to avoid a rout while simultaneously withholding the very weapon Ukraine believes it needs to win, thereby keeping all parties, including Kyiv, under pressure to come to the negotiating table. The specifics of the weapon package, detailed in a Pentagon briefing led by Secretary of Defense Peter Hegseth, underscore this new defense posture. The shipment will not include the long-range ATACMS missiles or advanced F-16 fighter jets that President Zelensky's government has pleaded for. Instead, the aid is focused on replenishing Ukraine's depleted stocks of basic but essential defensive armament. This includes large quantities of 155mm artillery shells, a critical need identified in the wake of the Pokrovsk breakthrough, as well as thousands of Javelin anti-tank missiles and Stinger anti-aircraft missiles. The package also reportedly includes short-range air defense systems such as the Avenger platform, designed to counter low-flying drones and helicopters, but not the most sophisticated long-range Patriot system needed to defend cities from ballistic missile attacks. Secretary Hegseth was clear that this aid comes with unprecedented and stringent conditions. This is not a blank check, he stated firmly. Every piece of equipment is being provided with the explicit, legally binding requirement that it be used for defensive purpose on sovereign Ukrainian territory only. We are implementing a new, robust monitoring and verification regime with American oversight to ensure these conditions are met. This new level of American supervision is intended to address concerns about weapon proliferation and to give Washington a direct level of control over Ukrainian battlefield operations. The message is that the United States will help Ukraine hold its ground, but it will not permit its weapon to be used in a way that risks a direct conflict between NATO and Russia. President Trump personally weighed in on the decision, framing it as an example of peace through strength and smart diplomacy. In a post on his Truth social platform, he wrote, "We are helping Ukraine defend itself from being wiped off the map, but we are not funding an endless war. We are sending the weapons for a strong defense so that the killing can be stopped and a deal can be made. It's called being smart, not weak. America first." This statement encapsulates the administration's dual objectives: to appear strong and supportive of an unbattled nation while firmly rejecting the previous administration's policy of open-ended support for total victory. Secretary of State Marco Rubio defended the policy on the diplomatic front, portraying it as a necessary component of a broader peace initiative. A complete collapse of the Ukrainian line serves no one's interest and would only lead to more bloodshed and instability, Rubio explained. By shoring up their defenses, we give our Ukrainian partners the ability to negotiate from a position of resilience, not desperation. This is not about winning a war, it's about ending a war. The reaction from Ukraine was one of muted relief mixed with profound disappointment. While grateful for any assistance that can help stop the bleeding on the front line, Ukrainian officials privately expressed frustration that the aid package deliberately denies them the tools they feel are necessary to change the war's fundamental trajectory. For them, it is a lifeline, but one that anchors them to a strategic stalemate they cannot win. Adding to the sense of crisis engulfing Ukraine, devastating reports have emerged from the northeastern front confirming that a large contingent of Ukrainian force has been encircled by the Russian military near the village city of Kupiansk. This catastrophic development referred to by military analysis as the Kupiansk squadron, represent a military disaster on a scale not seen for over a year and threatened to accelerate the collapse of Ukraine's defensive posture in the Kharkiv region. Russian forces, executing a well-coordinated pincer movement, have reportedly advanced from the north and south of the city, successfully closing a ring around the Ukrainian defenders and cutting off their main supply and escape routes. The development has transformed the city from a heavily contested frontline position into a deadly trap, with thousands of Ukrainian soldiers now caught inside with dwindling resources and facing constant bombardment from all sides. Kupiansk has long been a strategic prize in the conflict due to its status as a major railway and logistic hub. For months, Ukrainian forces have fought tenaciously to hold the city and its surrounding area, using it as a base to defend the wider region. However, the Russian command appeared to have capitalized on the Ukrainian military focus on the crisis in Pokrovsk to launch its own decisive offensive in the northeast. The encirclement was achieved with alarming speed, suggesting a significant local superiority in Russian troops' numbers and firepower. The trapped Ukrainian brigades are now in a desperate situation, subjected to relentless artillery fire, drone attacks, and aerial bombing. Russian forces are reportedly tightening the noose, systematically capturing the outlying village and roads that once connected the Kupiansk garrison to friendly territory. The news of the Kupiansk cauldron has shattered the already fragile command structure in Kyiv, pouring gasoline on the fire of the political and military infighting. The disaster has triggered a new and more vicious round of accusations between President Zelensky's office and the general staff. Political figures are demanding to know why a timely withdrawal was not ordered, while military leaders are pointing to their long-standing and ignored warnings about insufficient manpower and ammunition to hold such a long and exposed front line. The failure to anticipate or counter the Russian pincer movement at Kupiansk is being seen as an intelligence and command failure of the highest order, making the recrimination over the Pokrovsk breakthrough seems minor by comparison. For the soldiers inside the cauldron, the strategic debate in Kyiv is a world away. They are fighting for their survival. Reports from the pocket describe a grim reality of ammunition rationing, overwhelmed medical station, and constant Russian psychological warfare operations with loudspeaker and leaflet drops calling on them to surrender to avoid annihilation. The Ukrainian command is attempting to organize desperate breakout attempts and to airdrop supplies, but these efforts are proving to be extremely costly and largely ineffective in the face of Russian air defense and electronic warfare systems that dominate the airspace over the cauldron. This battlefield catastrophe provides a stark and grim context for the recent American policy decisions. For the Trump administration, the encirclement at Kupiansk served as the ultimate tragic validation of its new strategy. It reinforced the White House's assessment that Ukraine's goal of reclaiming all its territory is no longer realistic, and that continuing to supply offensive weapons for such a purpose would be futile. The defensive-only aid package announced by Washington, which will take time to arrive, can do nothing for the thousands of soldiers already trapped. The administration's supporters now argue that the Kupiansk disaster proved the wisdom of shifting focus to preventing future collapse by forcing Ukraine into a more sustainable defensive posture. Even if it means sacrificing the brave defenders caught in the current disaster, the cauldron is not just a military loss. It is a symbol of a brutal strategic reality that is now forcing the hand of leaders in Kyiv, Washington, and across Europe. The confluence of major security crises in both Eastern Europe and the Middle East has exposed a critical and alarming vulnerability within the military industrial base of the United States and its key NATO allies. A dangerously low inventory of advanced Patriot air defense systems and their essential interceptor missiles. This severe shortage provides a stark logistical backdrop to the recent dramatic shift in American foreign policy and highlights the immense strain placed on Western arsenals by simultaneous high-intensity conflicts. The deficit is no longer a theoretical concern for military planners, but a tangible reality that is actively shaping battlefield outcomes in Ukraine and dictating strategic decisions in Washington and Berlin. For Ukraine, the lack of adequate air defense has proven to be a decisive factor in its recent military catastrophe. The Russian breakthrough at Pokrovsk and the subsequent encirclement of Ukrainian troops in the Kupiansk quadrant were both enabled by Russia's ability to dominate the skies near the front line, using glide bombs and missile strikes to decimate Ukrainian defensive position with little fear of reprisal. For months, Kyiv has issued increasingly desperate pleas for additional Patriot batteries, which it sees as the only effective counter to Russia's sophisticated ballistic and cruise missiles. However, these pleas have run up against the hard wall of dwindling supply. In Washington, the Patriot shortage served as a core justification for the Trump administration's refusal to provide Ukraine with the offensive and high-end defensive system it desires. Officials from the Department of Defense have been blunt in their assessment. Secretary of Defense Peter Hegseth explained in a recent press briefing that the United States-owned stockpile have been drawn down to what is considered the bare minimum required for the nation's own security. We have global commitments, Hegseth stated. We have force to protect in the Pacific. We have a clear and present threat to defend against the Middle East with our ally Israel, and we have the homeland to secure. We cannot send our premier air defense assets abroad when our own stocks are at a critical level. It would be a dereliction of our primary duty to protect the American people. This position makes it clear that prioritizing the replenishment of U.S. inventories and securing key treaty allies like Israel now take precedence over arming Ukraine for a prolonged war. This is not solely an American problem. Germany, which has been one of the largest European providers of military hardware to Ukraine, is facing an identical crisis. The German Ministry of Defense has confidentially informed its NATO partners that its own contingent of Patriot system is stretched to the absolute limit. After transferring several of its systems to Ukraine and deploying others to protect NATO's eastern flank, Germany has few, if any, spare batteries left. This leaves Berlin with no capacity to offer further air defense support and raise serious questions about its ability to defend its own airspace in a wider conflict. The root of the problem lies in decades of post-Cold War defense planning, where the production of complex systems like the Patriot and its interceptor missiles was tailored for peacetime needs, not for the voracious consumption rates of two simultaneous major conflicts, as a single Patriot interceptor missile can cost several $1 million and takes a significant amount of time to manufacture. The Western defense industrial base is now in a desperate race to ramp up production, but this is a process that takes years, not months. The current shortage is therefore a binding constraint on Western policy, forcing an agonizing triage of security priorities and lending a grim, practical weight to the American administration's decision to shift its focus from fueling Ukraine's fight to managing its own readiness. Many of my listeners, like 70%, haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, and so many of you don't even know that you haven't subscribed. And that is actually what makes the show going. It's almost like you're making a donation to the show. So that's why I ask again and again, because it enables us to grow and grow and grow, and we're going for the long haul here. And listen, if this is your first time listening to Sokhain Rich, you don't have to subscribe. You guys, your first one's on me. But if you have watched this show before, it's like you are a freeloader now. So all I would ask you is, if you have seen this show before and you like it, help me, help my team here. Now hit that subscribe and like button now, and we will continue to build this show for you. That I swear. Thank you to all of you guys who have subscribed. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much. That's all for me for today. I will see you soon. Bye for now.